This recording is going to be slightly more informational and not so recreational, if you get my drift. If you've come to my page and you're enjoying it, thank you. I appreciate your excitement. I'm always delighted to hear about the experiences people have here. People have talked about having their biggest orgasms, their first orgasms, their biggest orgasms ever in any context. And some people who have gone deeper with me have been able to even overcome things like their inability to orgasm, or their fears of pleasure and sex, or the ability to connect to others erotically and explore themselves and their bodies and their partners. So this isn't just fun and games for me, although it's very fun. It's a mission. It's a calling. Because we live in a very pleasure-negative world. We live in a world where it's okay to show children people shooting other people and blowing up and being killed and blood and guts and evisceration. But it's not okay for them to see naked bodies or people enjoying pleasure. Sex negativity, pleasure negativity has driven pleasure into the wilderness. And as a result, when we see pleasure, when we see nakedness, it's a lot about consumerism, buying shit. It's a lot about manipulation, and it has very little to do with the original creation purpose of our bodies. And you might say that America is the place where this is the worst, because America was founded on a Puritan series of beliefs that have carried forth until the present. And with a few exceptions, it's still very strong. And so when I grew up in a very strict religious environment, and I definitely got all the messages about sex being basically bad, evil, rotten, of the devil, etc. Of course, there were a couple places where it was kind of okay to have sex, but generally all desire, lust, etc. were completely denigrated and discouraged. And so I had quite a journey of finding my way back to my pleasure, of learning to love my body, of learning to accept my sexuality and my pleasure. And that journey has taken me, a decade plus of full-time work now, and a lot of money to get therapy and teachers to learn about Tantra and energetic sexuality, and yes, hypnosis and trance work and the imagination. And so what I wanted to do with this recording is to talk to primarily the female millennial. So if you're under 30 and you're listening to this, I feel for you if you've come out of a sex negative culture or religious upbringing or family, and there's a lot of shame about your pleasure. In fact, I think that's what causes so much suffering, from drugs to suicide to actually teenage pregnancy and other things, is the fact that we're not able to honestly accept and enjoy and experience our pleasure. And for that reason, I have decided to go more and more deeply into pushing pleasure. I thought, if I grew up in a church where sexuality, even masturbation, was evil and wrong, where nudity was all called pornography and judged as evil, and that kind of fucked me up in my relationships, in my life, and my connection to my body for a long time, then what could I do to support people who are in a similar situation and don't know how to deal with it. Well, very often, if you're in that repressed background, your fantasy life is going to be quite strong. And those I've met in the erotic hypnosis world and other worlds who have the strongest fantasy lives have often had the most repressed actual lives. So if I were to try to heal and to support those who were struggling against pleasure negativity, then what I would do is to provide absolute pleasure and fantasy positivity, and even giving a nice little push into fantasy, into pleasure, into accepting your body, into enjoying your body, into expressing yourself sexually and erotically, however works for you, which only you know and which only you can figure out. And so I have a smorgasbord of offerings and lots of different recordings that you can listen to and try out that will help you explore various parts of your sexuality. For many of us, just accepting our bodies, accepting being nude, accepting being seen. There's a lot of women who only want to make love with the lights off, not because they're not attractive, but because of the messages they've received. So even starting there is a very basic place where in Europe, where I lived for many years, it's just common to go to the beach naked and people aren't worried about nudity and they understand the difference between nudity and sexuality. I really want to support us in accepting our bodies, loving our bodies, accepting our genitals, loving our genitals, and then accepting our desires, our lust, our pleasure, our fascination, our fetishes, and gaining courage to feel them and experience them on the way towards developing a more powerful sexuality. When I look at people who I admire and who I see as happy and well balanced, there has to be an acceptance and love of their own pleasure and desire and sexuality and lust, and being able to go into that and feel it and experience it. And so if you have permission and encouragement to do that, then you can actually begin to have a fantastic relationship with your own body and your own pleasure, regardless of partners, and then experience and explore that with other people. And I think that's really needed as a foundation. So if I look at those of us who are learning or younger at heart and experiencing our bodies and relationships for the first time, in getting to know them in our younger years, to say that way, I want to provide you with all sorts of doorways to go in and experience your body. And I've created more structured programs as well, but I find that very often people want to experience the thing that they are into right now. And that's okay. It's fine to just have fun and experience. If you want a deeper, structured way to look at your sexuality, then that's fine. I've actually even created courses to experience and explore your own body and or BDSM and relationships in a way that's really structured and logical. And that works for other people who kind of have those logical minds and really want to get in it that way. But I've definitely had a lot of resonance from people enjoying the art of the voice and speaking into your erotic experience in a way that just allows you to let go of everything that happened before, your religious upbringing and your family. Not that you have to let go of any of it, but anything that didn't work for you in that, or your society, and just experience your own pleasure as an active revolution for your life, for finding happiness. So with that said, I'm going to put out many recordings in that direction, sort of the fundamentals of things you can do and experience and explore erotically and sexually in your own mind, in your own fantasies, where there's no danger of getting pregnant or getting an STI or anything like that. And then from there, you can begin to integrate some of your own erotic core theme and story and pleasure into your life and begin to express with other people. So I've studied the heck out of this. I've made every mistake you can make, I guess. Maybe not every mistake, but I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I'm always happy to chat with anyone who wants support. I have set up the Patreon, and I'm going to be putting the structures and the MP3s and things in Patreon for those who really want to dive in and stay in contact with me. Put up regular recordings, maybe even daily ones is what I'm looking at right now. Short daily ones with longer ones, once or twice a week. And as I said, we're going to have definitely a series of recordings that's just for women. Probably also a series for men as well coming out, so stay tuned. I was very chagrined to get as much attention from men as I have, but that's awesome. If I'm useful, then I love being useful and bringing pleasure to everyone. And then there's going to be even more as time goes on, opportunities, live recording or live experiences where I'm on webcam with you and speaking to a group. We'll play with that. You'll find that all on Patreon as well. And developing a real community of exploring pleasure together. And then my desire for you, the more you go into it, is to begin sharing these experiences that you have with others that you care about, and exploring and beginning to talk about sex and sexuality and intimacy and relationships and desire, and being able to do it very openly. And maybe you can use some of this as a doorway into finding your erotic community and connecting with friends and just talking about these things. Because as long as we're all in shame and fear and guilt about our sexuality, we're not going to have a very fun world. In fact, we're going to have a world that's quite violent and where we're trying to get from others what actually is in ourselves, and that's going to create a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world. So, thank you for listening to this and everything else. I hope I've been supportive of your personal pleasure. Let me know how I can do that in the future, and just know that I'm creating a program for basic erotic skills and abilities, and that's what's coming out lately, most of the recordings, so that you can begin to apply the erotic, your actual erotic fantasies, desires, dreams, wishes in your life, and get what you want from it, and begin to build relationships based on healthy, shame-free, guilt-free, fear-free sexual experiences in ways that work for you. Have a more pleasurable, sensual life in general. And this is what I do to save and change the world. This is what we need to do to have a better world to be in. I am convinced. We won't be able to support the world or have a much different world if we're not enjoying it. So we have to enjoy it first. This has been Ryan / Dr. O. Thanks for listening, and you have a good one.